evidence this Tuesday night about the Indian government's alleged links to violent crimes in Canada.
This puts everyone at risk.
The attacks against Sikh activists and why it will be tough bringing anyone to justice. Ultimatum, what the U.S. says it will do if Israel doesn't boost humanitarian aid to Gaza.
The situation for children becomes worse than the day before.
Inflation takes a dip, what it could mean for the Bank of Canada's upcoming decision on interest rates. Plus, rescued and greatly relieved, the emaciated man stranded at sea for more than 2 months.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a tense diplomatic standoff between Canada and India. Both countries have expelled diplomats after the RCMP accused Indian government agents of criminal activity, from murder to extortion and intimidation on Canadian soil. The victims were mostly supporters of the Khalistan movement, which wants a separate Sikh nation, something India's government is vehemently opposed to. The killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, BC last year is the most prominent crime in Canada, but Global News has learned about a range of attacks against Sikh activists across the country and that police have evidence the operation goes right to the top, to India's second most powerful politician. Mackenzie Gray begins our reporting tonight.
It was a brazen attack. 14 bullets shot at Punjab music star A.P. Dillon's Vancouver Island home in September, and Global News has learned that agents of the Indian government were linked to that attack and multiple other crimes across Canada, including the September 2023 murder of Sukhdev Singh Gill in Winnipeg, extortions in Edmonton, and a drive-by shooting at the home of Khalistani activist Inderjeet Singh Gosal in Brampton, Ontario.
I know what I signed up for. Death doesn't scare me.
Gosal is one of 13 people the RCMP say they warned in person that their life is in danger.
These threats are going to keep coming. It's not going to stop until these care houses aren't shut down.
The Mounties have alleged agents of the Indian government have been involved with homicides, extortion, intimidation, and coercion of people in Canada, also alleging the Indian government has interfered in the Canadian democratic process, and diplomats posted in Canada have collected information about Canadian citizens and passed on to the Modi government, allegations Delhi strenuously denies.
Engaged by a diplomat.
The NDP's Jagmeet Singh calling for additional sanctions against Indian diplomats.
And let's have a united front. Let's be together on the same side against the Modi government, against the Indian government that's putting Canadian lives at risk.
Why was it that Sikhs were targeted from the beginning?
But Singh, who is one of Canada's most prominent Sikhs, would not say if he's been warned by the RCMP about his own safety.
It's not about me. I really want this to be about the safety and security of Canadians. And what the RCMP laid out is deeply concerning.
Indian media taking a much different tone compared to Singh and Justin Trudeau.
This is a dictionary example of diplomatic firebombing, trying to make a big show of some kind of big splash in order to, in some ways, seduce the Khalistani terrorist community in Canada.
Sources have told Global News Khalistani separatists and Modi government opponents in Canada were two of the groups targeted by agents of the Indian government. But bringing anyone to justice over the alleged crimes will likely require outside help.
We are a relatively small player in the eyes of the Indians. To the extent that we make much progress in the near future, it seems to me that will be as a result of assistance from our allies.
The key ally, the Americans, with a U.S. official telling Global News they plan to continue to consult with Canada about the allegations, which they describe as deeply concerning. Donna?
Mackenzie, thanks. And with me now is our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson. Mercedes, do we have any more insight into who directed the Indian officials the RCMP is accusing?
Yes, Donna, we do. Global News has learned that this goes right to the top of the Indian government. The national security investigation carried out here in Canada has produced evidence that the operation here was allegedly approved by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's right-hand man, Amit Shah. Shah is considered to be Modi's closest confidant, and he's widely viewed as the second most powerful man in India. He serves as the country's home secretary, meaning that he's the cabinet minister who's in charge of India's internal security. But his influence goes far beyond that. Shah has been friends with Modi for more than 40 years, and along the way, he's developed a reputation for being a shrewd politician, able to deliver results, credited with successful campaign strategies and political organization, most notably for helping to first bring Modi's party to power in India and being at the center of its ongoing power. Shah is known as a hardline Hindu nationalist, which makes him a polarizing figure. His foes consider him a formidable enemy, and some have even said they fear him. And he has faced serious allegations in India, all of which he denied. In 2010, he was arrested and charged with the extrajudicial killing of a Muslim couple 5 years earlier. But a court cleared him of that in 2014, 6 months after Modi took power, with the judge saying that the charges were politically motivated. He's been by Modi's side ever since, Donna, and we've been hearing his name here in Canada for months. In fact, I asked the Foreign Minister Melanie Joly about his possible involvement in transnational repression here back in June, and she was not able to disclose anything at that time. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes in Ottawa, thank you. There is more detail about the crimes in Canada and why it's believed they were approved by that powerful Indian politician. You can find that on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Air India says it's been subject to a number of hoax threats recently. One Air India flight made an emergency landing in Nunavut this morning after what the RCMP says was a bomb threat. A flight tracking website shows it en route from New Delhi to Chicago, and it was diverted towards the Iqaluit airport in Nunavut. Everyone on board is safe. Air India says the emergency landing was a precaution. It says it and other airlines have been subject to a number of threats in recent days, which have all subsequently been found to be hoaxes. At the same time as all that is playing out, the federal inquiry into foreign interference is still underway. The chief of staff to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau testified today. Katie Telford said there is no simple answer to bolstering the integrity of political nomination contests because she says the parties all have different practices.
My observation would be it's a pretty complex space to enter into greater regulation within nominations. So making choices that makes all of that the same for everyone would really upend how political parties operate right now.
A report released in June by the National Security and Intelligence Committee revealed concerns about how easily foreign actors can take advantage of loopholes to support their preferred candidate as they're going through the nomination process. After months of being criticized for not pushing Israel harder to avoid civilian deaths in Gaza, the United States is now warning Israel's government to boost access to humanitarian aid in Gaza or risk having some American military assistance cut off. Israel relies on American weaponry and funding to defend itself. At the same time, Israel's military is repeatedly hitting civilian areas in Gaza and controls all access to food, water, and medicine. Redmond Shannon explains what misery that's causing.
Alongside the daily casualties from Israel's new offensive in northern Gaza comes civilian suffering.
August was the lowest amount of humanitarian aid that came into the Gaza Strip of any full month since the war broke out.
The United Nations says 400,000 people are now effectively trapped in the north. On Sunday, the US sent a letter to the Israeli government, which speaks of the US government's deep concern over the humanitarian situation. The letter cited Israel's halting of commercial imports and impeding most humanitarian movements in September. Among other requests, the letter gives Israel 30 days to allow at least 350 aid trucks to enter Gaza daily, allow adequate humanitarian pauses, and the removal of some aid restrictions. Otherwise, there may be implications for US policy under NSM 20. That's a regulation that requires military aid to be used within the rule of international law.
The United States is not going to leave Israel defenseless, but it's trying desperately to send a signal here.
The US State Department said the letter was supposed to be private, but it was leaked just 3 weeks before the US election.
I think this time there was an interest to show publicly that the US is putting pressure on humanitarian aid.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may try to stick with his current strategy until polling day in the US. But on previous occasions when Washington pressured Israel to increase aid, it has worked somewhat. What exactly the punishment would be for not complying is uncertain.
I'm not going to speak to that today.
A day after the letter was sent, Israel released this video of what it said was 30 aid trucks entering northern Gaza. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A team of U.S. military personnel has arrived in Israel to install and operate a powerful high-altitude anti-missile system. The Pentagon says it will help defend against threats from Iran. There are already a small number of U.S. forces in Israel. This new deployment of about 100 troops signals further American entanglement in the expanding regional war. There are reports Israeli officials have assured the Biden administration a counterstrike on Iran will be limited to military targets and not oil or nuclear sites. Israel responded to those reports with this statement: "We listen to the opinions of the United States, but we will make our final decisions based on our national interests." American voters will make their final decisions soon. With just 3 weeks to go until the U.S. presidential election, Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican rival Donald Trump are making pitches in key battleground states. As Jackson Prosco explains, they're both looking to try to win over the few voters who are still believed to be undecided.
Day one of early voting in Georgia.
I think this is an existential election.
Brought record-breaking turnout in a state that could decide the presidency.
We're really a critical state in that election.
And these are crucial final days in an unusual campaign.
We're going to make your fight easier.
Monday night, Donald Trump cut short his own town hall after 2 people fainted in the crowd.
Let's make this a musical fest.
He then spent a bizarre 39 minutes dancing and swaying on stage.
There's no need to feel down.
That kind of behavior has Kamala Harris firing off repeated questions about Trump's mental state.
Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged.
Just 3 weeks until Election Day, and polls suggest the race is still neck and neck.
Hundreds of pages of facts.
Increasingly, both campaigns are trying to reach voters on the fringes. Trump sat with business leaders in Chicago Tuesday.
We had 4 years of this lunacy, and we can't have it anymore. We're not going to have a country left.
The government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
Harris has been doing targeted podcasts and will sit for an interview with Fox News, aimed at reaching soft Trump supporters. And back in Georgia, a judge has ruled that local election officials must certify their results by a fixed date. Pro-Trump election officials had demanded the power to investigate allegations of fraud based on Trump's false claims about the last election. The court said any such concerns should instead be investigated by law enforcement. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
North Korea put its anger on display today, blowing up sections of unused road and rail routes that once linked it to South Korea. The choreographed demolition took out infrastructure on the northern side of the heavily fortified border. Last week, the North accused Seoul of sending drones over Pyongyang and scattering anti-North leaflets. Pyongyang warned it would cut off the inter-Korean roads and railways as a part of its push for a two-state system and scrapping its goal of unification. There's a harrowing story of a man who survived 67 days stranded on a small boat in the icy waters off the northwestern Pacific Ocean. This is the moment he was rescued. Russian authorities say the 46-year-old man was discovered by a fishing boat off the Kamchatka Peninsula. He was in a small inflatable. His brother and nephew died on board. The man's wife says his bulk may have helped save him. He weighed 100 kilos when he set off and is down to about 50 kilos now. He is in hospital in serious condition. As temperatures drop, so is inflation coming up. What that could mean for interest rates. There's more reason for the Bank of Canada to possibly cut interest rates again next week. Canada's inflation rate took another tumble in September, dropping to 1.6%. It's a big slide from where it was at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic at 8.1%, and well below the Bank of Canada's 2% target. Anne Gaviola digs further into the numbers.
The headlines tell us that inflation has cooled significantly.
price stability in Canada is achieved.
In September, we paid less for gas, airfare, clothing, and shoes, but prices for things we can't do without, like rent and food, remain elevated.
The heavy hitters, food, groceries, shelter, that's really where our wallets are being impacted right now.
Plus, there's the cumulative effect of inflation. Over the past 3 years, rent and grocery prices across Canada have ballooned by about 20%.
Canadians have been struggling with these raised costs for essentials for a number of years now.
But weak economic growth has overtaken inflation fears as the main concern among policymakers.
The Canadian economy has barely seen any growth. On a per capita basis, consumer spending is actually down.
The Bank of Canada has cut interest rates by 1/4 percentage point 3 times in a row. With inflation running well below the central bank's target, some economists see the need for a bigger move.
I think it's time for the Bank of Canada to take bold action. Our view is that they will decide to lower interest rates by 50 basis points at their upcoming October meeting.
I do think that we may be in line for yet another 25 basis point decrease.
September inflation is the final major data point the central bank will consider before its next interest rate announcement on October 23rd. And we will see if the smallest year-over-year increase in inflation since early 2021 is enough to prompt the Bank of Canada to enact more than the smallest of cuts. Donna?
Okay, Anne Galviola in Toronto. Thanks, Anne. If you live on the prairies in Ontario or in Atlantic Canada, you may have noticed a top-up to your bank account today. It's the federal carbon tax rebate, and for the first time, the government says it's being clearly labeled. The money should show up in your bank account as Canada Carbon Rebate. It used to be labeled as EFT deposit or something else vague, leading to confusion about what it was. Defending their identity ahead, what's at stake in New Brunswick's upcoming provincial election? Voters in New Brunswick will decide next Monday whether Progressive Conservative leader Blaine Higgs gets a third term as premier. The campaign is mostly focused on health care and cost of living, but some voters haven't forgotten a controversial policy about gender identity in schools. Heidi Petrachik spoke with voters who feel there's a lot at stake for them personally as they worry about what a Conservative win might mean for queer rights.
That is probably my largest influence right now when I vote.
Manny Travers says the PC government's decision to change New Brunswick's gender policy in schools last year hurt the queer community.
People had become more comfortable at showing their hate and their discomfort and their lack of education or awareness.
Travers came out at school about a decade ago. The change to Policy 713 means now teachers have to notify parents before students under 16 can be called by their preferred name and pronouns, sparking protests at the time and building tension ever since.
I definitely feel less safe.
A September poll suggests more New Brunswickers support the change than oppose it. But for Stevie Clark, who also came out at school first,
I think the right of people to identify as they feel comfortable is important. And to disagree with that, that's a hard line for me.
They say they'll be voting Liberal.
There was a time last year when Blaine Higgs was prepared to call an early election over his stance on Policy 713 and all the controversy it created. That didn't happen.
But 8 caucus members did revolt against the change. Only one is running again. In the campaign now underway, the PC platform reiterates it will, quote, respect parents, while the Liberals would allow children 12 and up to control their name and pronouns at school. The two parties close in polling.
The brand that he had prior to Policy 713 was kind of slow and steady wins the race, economic, fiscal conservatism, and then that message got lost after Policy 713, and other parties may have come in to fill the void a bit.
It starts with a name, and then it snowballs.
Clark says that's their biggest worry, with gender-based rhetoric coming from Conservative candidates here and across the country. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Fredericton.
Next, the rare cosmic snowball visible to Canadian stargazers. A pair of giant pandas arrived in Washington, D.C. from China today, and they're settling into their new home at the National Zoo. The facility had been without pandas, a popular attraction for nearly a year now. These 3-year-old male and female bears named Bao Li and Qing Bao are a gift from China intended to warm relations between the two superpowers. It's an event that comes around once every 80,000 years or so. A comet so bright it can be seen with the naked eye. There's one streaking over Canada now, but you have to act fast if you want to see it. As Heather Yurix-West reports, photographers have already captured some spectacular images.
With a fireball streaking above the Rocky Mountains, lighting up Calgary's night sky, parts of Western Canada were treated to quite the show Monday.
Well, this comet has not been in our part of the solar system for about 80,000 years. So that means pretty much the last time it came, the Neanderthals were still around, which is amazing.
But Comet Tsuchinshan Atlas wasn't discovered by scientists here on Earth until last year. It's been traveling close enough in recent weeks to be spotted first in the southern hemisphere before making its way up to where we northerners can see it too. This is a time-lapse view of the comet over Russia and another similar image captured over North Macedonia.
Right now, the best time to view it is about an hour after sunset. Just look toward the west, where the sun went down, and then look over to the right, and you'll see a really bright planet there, Venus.
On clear nights, Canadian stargazers should be able to spot the comet just above Venus for the next few days. After that, we may not see another like it for quite some time.
It will be a few years, yes. We do not have anything listed as, oh, this is the next bright comet, not in 2024 or 25.
But the solar storms we've been experiencing are expected to continue into next year, so we'll still have plenty more of those beautiful auroras illuminating our night sky. Heather Yurix-West, Global News, Calgary.
So stunning. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Mackenzie Beach in Tofino, British Columbia. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.